good question. So it's easy to take Isaiah 65 and Revelation 21 and conflate the two passages when they're speaking about two specific different topics. He says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things will not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem for rejoicing, and her people for gladness. I will also rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people, and there will no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping and the sound of crying." He is speaking not of the new heavens and a new earth as John does in Revelation 21:1, where he sees the old heaven and the old earth flee, and God creates a new heaven and a new earth. He's speaking here of the regenerated earth. When Peter, like in Acts 3, speaks of the coming kingdom, he speaks of this time of the reign of Messiah, when God, to use Jesus' words, will regenerate the earth. And with the earth, he is somehow regenerating the heavens. But clearly, this is different, and we know that for several reasons. Again, at the coming of Christ, after he rules for 1,000 years upon the earth, this current earth that we are on at the end of the millennial reign of Christ is going to be destroyed. And so Scripture reminds us, know this, first of all, that in the last days mockers will come, and he describes what will happen. And then he reminds us that although God once destroyed the world through a flood, he said, but by his word, the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. And so he reminds us that the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. So this current heaven and earth is going to be destroyed. And he says, we're looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, the elements will melt with intense heat. Sometimes you will have Christians, again, they conflate these two passages, and they think that, God's just going to take the earth that we're on and he's going to fix it up. No, he's going to destroy it. The scripture says in Revelation 21:1, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there was no longer any sea." So again, even this judgment that takes place right prior to it, we call the Great White Throne Judgment. It takes place at a time when heaven and earth is gone, and so it's somewhere in outer space right before God creates a new heaven and a new earth. So clearly we're talking about two different things, but it's new in a very real sense, in that it's regenerated, and there are characteristics of it that are very different from the earth that we're on. And so, for instance, in continuing reading here, not only will there be no more heartache in Jerusalem, which has been their history, no more weeping, no more crying. The next verse says, "No longer will there be in it an infant who does not live but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his days. For the youth will die at the age of 100, and the one who does not reach the age of 100 will thought to be accursed." And so again, he's describing here a very, very different time frame in human history. I think it would parallel the days before the Great Flood, when, based on the way the heavens and the earth were, people lived a long period of time. I cover this to some extent in my series on the Genesis, on the book of Beginnings, and there in that book we refer to the Great Flood. And of course, even science, sometimes in mocking Christians, will say, if every single cloud on the earth rained at once, then at most there'd be 18 inches of water, 18 to 20 inches of water across the planet. How can you say that the highest mountain in the world was 18 inches underwater? For that's what the Genesis account teaches. Because God opens up the waters in the depths below, whether you know it or not. We're sitting on lakes and rivers underneath our feet. They came and dug a new well in my yard recently, and they had to go down 220 feet, and they hit one of those great aquifers, an underground lake, to suck up the water so I can have fresh, pure, unchemicaled water to drink from. And God also brought water from above. And so it's often argued that there was a canopy around the earth because the scripture teaches that Moses never felt a raindrop, that God watered the earth with a mist from below. And so if John Whitcomb in his book, The Genesis Flood, is correct, and he was a great scientist who taught at Stanford University, he said we had a terrarium effect where a mist from below would come up and water the whole earth. And that's part of the reason why people live for so long, because that protective covering was there, but now it's gone. And so, again, he's describing that there'll be death in the millennium nonetheless. And if you only live to be 100, for some reason, you're considered to be cursed. Now, I might joke to a 100-year-old person, now, who is this young lady who turned 100 today? Well, if we're living during the millennium, that would not be a joke, because a young man would be considered to be 100, unless he's cursed. Why? Because God will be ruling and reigning with a rod of iron. Going on further here in Isaiah, they will build houses and inhabit them. They will also plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. For as the lifetime of a tree, so will be the days of my people, and my chosen ones will wear out the work of their own hands. Again, he's describing this time not just of biological transformation, but a time of social transformation. Why? Because Jesus is ruling and reigning on the earth. So if you build a house, no one's going to rip you off. If you plant a vineyard, no one's going to steal from it. I had a friend who had a big watermelon farm, and it was a constant fight where these people would drive up in their cars, they'd open their trunk, they'd pick 10 watermelons, throw them in the trunk, and take off. No such thing during the time of Christ's reign on the earth. He goes on to say they will not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they are the offspring of those blessed by the Lord and their descendants with them. So again, in the eternal state, people neither marry nor are given in marriage. In the eternal state, there is death no more. The Revelation says there's no more death. And so there's death here in the millennium under the sovereignty of the Lord, and there are people having babies in the millennium. And this argues, again, for a pre-tribulational rapture, because those who are alive during the time of the Great Tribulation, who survive it, who enter into the millennium in their natural bodies, will be able to procreate, and they will be able to have a lot of children, and their children can potentially live all 1,000 years. Why will Christ have to rule with a rod of iron? For the simple reason that there will be people born who will have to make a decision for Christ, and not everyone will decide for him. And so at the end of the millennial reign, where Satan has been bound for 1,000 years and he's given freedom to be loosed, he'll be able to tempt people to go against Christ. You'd say, how could they possibly go against Jesus? Here he is ruling on the earth's sovereignty, for the same reason they rejected him when he was here the first time. So you want to be careful here, and I hate to say it, and I don't want to criticize some of these books that have been written on heaven, but some of the books written on heaven are describing the millennial reign and what we will do during the millennial reign, and it's not a description. Now, there are certainly similarities. He'll go on there in Isaiah 65 to say, it will also come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will graze together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox, and the dust will be the serpent's food. They will do no evil or harm on my holy mountain. He's ruling and reigning with a rod of iron. So it's not until the end of the millennium that they are able to do some things when Satan comes and tempts them one final time. This is a very different age. Don't confuse it with heaven. Certainly there are parallels, but it's a very different age. And you might want to listen to a sermon I recently did. I actually did 2 sermons recently on the millennium. I'm doing a series called God's Prophetic Schedule. And I did 2 messages on the millennium. And in the second of those 2 messages, if you go to communitybiblechurch.us and just click on the green icon on the homepage, God's Prophetic Schedule, you will see 28 messages I've been doing. I think I have 2 more left in the series. But you can click on that and listen to the last two, and I give, among other reasons, 6 reasons for the millennium. Why doesn't the Lord just come back, take us all to heaven, and end it? Well, there's 6 reasons why.
Dr. Carl Broggi answers your questions about the Bible and living the Christian life Tuesday mornings at 11 on The Light, 88.7 FM, and online around the world at wagp.net.